Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, and welcome to this Wednesday webinar. We have quite a large turn up today, so what I will do is I will allow everyone to enter the webinar and give some time for people to join us. In the meantime, I just want to do a little sound check. Can somebody in the audience please confirm that you can hear me okay? That's sort of, I think, our standard question for every webinar. Hi, thanks, Farah. Thanks for confirming. Super. Like we do every webinar, we have enabled the Q&A. We have enabled the chat. So please feel free to introduce yourself, to say where you're from, to say hi to the rest of the audience. But also you can use the chat to leave your comments and to ask your questions. I will be talking for about 15, 20 minutes, and then we will leave some time for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So for those of you who are new to the Fleet Forum webinars, my name is Roos van Stijn. I am the development director with Fleet Forum, and I'm really happy to talk today about humanitarian fleet management standards. And maybe some of you who have been participating in these webinars or have been engaging with Fleet Forum for the last number of years, you might think like, oh, well, this topic sounds familiar. Yes, that's true. Sometimes we do repeat our webinars because we feel it is important to put some of our topics into the spotlight every now and then. But also because we as Fleet Forum, we do believe that working with standards, with management standards is important. And we try to take every opportunity to bring that across. So that's why we have this on the agenda again. Also because things do change, right? So maybe what was a good standard 5 years ago might have changed into different standards now. But let's start. Maybe in the chat box, if you can just write down what your daily challenges are. Just give us some examples of, as a fleet manager, what type of challenges are you encountering in your daily work? Could be in terms of environmental impact or cost control or road safety or maybe driver challenges, passenger challenges. So what are the typical fleet management challenges that you are dealing with? Maybe, I see Moses, thank you, improper planning from programs. Yeah, I think that's an issue that people can relate to, that time planning or making sure that trips are booked in time or planned in time, that is a challenge. So let me just maybe ask Moses and the rest of the audience, like, how do you deal with these challenges? When you feel like, okay, my staff is not planning their trips on time, how do you deal with them? Apart maybe from getting headaches or being frustrated. I'll just leave it. I see that people are typing. There was somebody who's introducing themselves. So basically, what we will talk about today is how you can deal with fleet management challenges, but also how you can do that in a structured way, making sure that you take the organization and the fleet management in your organization to a higher level every time. For those of you who are familiar with Fleet Forum, you know that we are very fond of the plan, do, check, and act cycle of continuous improvement. So that is basically what we are talking about today. Now, let me sort of share some of the challenges that we sometimes hear, and I think they will also relate to the challenges that you are writing in the chat box. So, for example, what do you do if you notice that one of your drivers has bad eyesight? What are the things that you do? Or another one, what do you do if one of your staff members asks the driver to drive at night? These things happen, right? Where people want to return or leave late in the evening and drive after the sun is going down. Let me share another one. What do you do if one of your workshops is draining used oil into the sewage? What are the types of things that you can do there? Or the last one, and these are just four, I think, very familiar situations that you might encounter in your country of operations. What do you do if a passenger that was involved in a crash does not want to participate in the investigation? So these are sort of some typical situations that you might encounter as the fleet manager, and that give you challenges, headaches, frustrations, and everything, right? Now, let's imagine for a moment that you do not have to deal with these ad hoc situations. And an ad hoc situation is the situation where you didn't plan for it. It just comes your way. It just arrives in your day, and you have to spend time. You have to spend energy. You have to spend resources on it. Now, imagine that you don't have to deal with these ad hoc situations. I think that life can be paradise, right? I mean, because then you can plan, then you can work on the issues that are important to the organization. Now, so let's imagine that if you don't have to deal with your driver that has bad eyesight, because you have in place annual medical checks, right? So even before the driver notices that his eyesight is deteriorating, already you put in place a practice that he needs to wear glasses. Now, imagine the staff member that asks the driver to drive at night. Well, if your life would be much, much, much nicer if the driver said no to drive at night because they feel backed up by senior management. Going to the one where your workshops are draining used oil into the sewage. Now, if you have already environmentally sustainable criteria in place when you select the workshop, then you would not be confronted with that situation, right? I hope that makes sense. And then the last one, now let's say that all of your staff, whether they or all of the people in the vehicles, they know that whenever there is a crash, that they will be invited for a crash investigation, an interview, and be included in the analysis. Then you would not have the discussion with that staff member that they don't want to participate. Now, and these situations where you say, okay, well, I'm confronted with this ad hoc situation that messes up my day, that messes up my fleet management. I need to find on-the-spot solutions for it. This is what you can avoid by using standards. And that's basically the whole. Maybe a drum roll would be appropriate. So introducing humanitarian fleet management standards. Okay. Now, maybe before we go into the standard, it's good to know what a management system is. So when we talk about a management system, it is basically a set of policies, processes, procedures that is used by an organization to ensure that it can do the tasks required to achieve its objectives. So it's a bit of a long definition, but basically what we are saying is like, if your organization is set out to achieve something, whether it is reducing hunger, or whether it is to provide medical services, or whether it is to protect refugees, then in order for the organization to achieve that objective, it needs to have policies, processes, and procedures that enables the organization to fulfill the task that we need to do to save lives, to reduce hunger. So when we relate that to fleet management, what we can say is we want to have standards in place where the organization proactively conducts driver medical checks once every 12 months. And why do we want to do that? We want to do that to ensure that the drivers are safe, the passengers are safe, but also the public, the third-party road users, are safe from occupational and lifestyle-related health issues. Now, if we say that we want to do that, if we say, in my organization, I want to make sure that all of my drivers are checked, medically checked, and to test if they are fit to drive, then we should also, when we implement standards and when we work according to standards, we should also have documented evidence of these yearly medical checks, so that whenever we have an audit or whenever something happens, we can say, okay, but we did do it, we have documented evidence of it. I'm going to give you another example. Let's maybe not do the driving at night, but the problem with unsustainable workshop practices, right? Where I gave the example of your workshop that is taking care of the maintenance and repair of your vehicles is draining used oil into the sewage. Now, as an organization, you don't want these type of workshop practices, right? And in order to avoid that, you want to have a policy in place that they are sustainably disposing fluids and waste whenever they work on your vehicles. And you want that to ensure that the environmental impact of the workshops are minimized. So now, you can demonstrate that by a written policy document, that's one, but also you can demonstrate that by including these type of criteria into your procurement practices. And you can, of course, then check that when you do an evaluation on a yearly basis with your workshop providers. Now, I hope those standards and why we should do that and how we can demonstrate it, that makes sense. And maybe in the chat, maybe you can already write down some of the standards that your organization is using. I see in the chat a question to clarify the definition of a policy versus a standard. Now, this the difference is the standard should say something about the ambition that the organization have of the working practice that you want to put in place. So, for example, in the case of, let's say cost control, the standard could be that the organization wants to ensure that 100% of the financial costs of the fleet is captured. That's the standard. So, because the standard, then you can also check if you meet the standard. So either check, did we capture all the costs, or are we missing some of the costs? And then the policy document is more the supporting document where you say, okay, in order for us to meet our standard of 100% cost capturing, this is what we want to do. So in our policy, we will write how we will do it, when we will do it, what we will do. And then you can also sort of support that with a procedure. So that's the difference between, or let's say the relation between the standard and the policy, or the difference between the standards and the policies. So now, why is this important? So a number of years ago, Fleet Forum, we worked together with INSEAD, the business school, to develop humanitarian fleet management standards. And we developed them at 3 levels. So basic level, advanced level, and professional level. And the basic level to us is a level that everybody who's working as a fleet manager on this call should meet. So you should look at the basic standards, where it says something about, okay, we have a fleet management strategy in place. We have somebody who's appointed in the organization who's responsible. We have somebody in the organization who's responsible for fleet and road safety, maybe for environmental impact of the fleet. And what you can do with these standards is that you can assess yourself. So on our knowledge platform, we do have an assessment where you can look at, okay, do I have this in place? So do we have a policy around this? Do we have a procedure? Do we have a structure? So that's the one type of assessment that you do. But then, and this is the maybe even the more important one, is then how have we implemented this? Because we all know, I think on this call, that sometimes we are really, really champions in producing a lot of paperwork, right? We write policies, we write documents, but then how do we ensure that the policies that we develop, maybe at country level or at HQ level, how do we ensure that these are sort of trickled down in the organization and that at a local level people are reading the policy and implementing the policy? So you can, if you look at the screen, you see on one hand you can score yourself from 1 to 4 whether you do have the policy, whether you do have the procedure and the structure in your organization. And on the other hand, you can then also see, okay, do I really implement this? Or do I think like, I like the paper, but I'm not doing it because I have other things to do. And that will give you a score. And then, of course, with the score, you can look at where your gaps are and where you should put your energy and effort to start either developing some of these policies or structures in your organization, or whether you should focus much more on implementing and making sure that that you follow what is set. And that could look something like this. So here you can see like, okay, well, we have gaps in our basic standards in terms of maybe strategic fleet management, because we do have the policies. We get 23 points for the policies, but we only, in the practical implementation, we only score 9. Maybe in our operational policies and procedures, so looking much more on your day-to-day fleet management, we are much better in following both the policies and the SOPs and implementing them as well. So this is how you can get insight in how your organization scores. And this is sort of a self-assessment. It's not captured, but it gives you insight in how you are doing and where your gaps are and what you can start looking at. And that all has to do with, like I said at the beginning, at the cycle of continuous improvement. By making sure that you're using standards, you can work on each standard. You can use that PDCA cycle of plan, do, check, and act. You can assess yourself again, and then you can work on it again. And of course, because it is a standard, you can raise the standard every time. And let me give you an example of that. When we first developed the humanitarian fleet management standards, almost everything that had to do with the environment was sort of, well, maybe an advanced standard or a professional standard, whereas over time, we say, no, we need to raise the bar. The environment is much more important for organizations at this moment. So we want to raise the bar, and we want to put things that a couple of years ago were seen as an advanced standard. We want to put that now as a basic standard. Similarly with topics like road safety or cost control. So we can raise standards every time, and that's what you can do yourself as well. If you are scoring a certain, if you're reaching or meeting a certain standard, then we hope that you are inspired to raise the bar for your organization and apply higher standards and more stricter standards. Now, maybe you ask yourself, why should I do this? Why should I use humanitarian fleet management standards? Well, Like I said, to assess your organization's performance, you can use the self-assessment, and then from that you will get that picture of the gaps that you are facing, and the working according to standards is really an effective way to make your fleet more effective, safer, cleaner, and more efficient. So because you have something to work against, or to work towards. That's the right word, to work towards, and that is really you don't have to come up with the standards yourself. You can sort of look at these standards, and these are well accepted by the sector. And you know that if you work on these standards, that your fleet will be more safe, more efficient, more effective, etc. in over time. Let me, with 9 more minutes, let me see if we have some questions. And let's see, I see. So if you have a question, make sure that you are using, if you type, make sure that you use the little question mark so that I can easily pick them out. But I will also scroll through the thing myself. Okay, yeah, we're conducting eye tests every year for all the drivers, but is there any clear standard list for basic medical checks to be put in place for drivers to focus on? Thank you. Thanks, Tarek, for this. So the answer is that if your organization does an eye test every year, and that's the only thing that you are doing, then basically I would say that's not meeting the standards, because yes, eyesight is important, but looking at the profession of a driver, looking at well the occupational, let's say the occupational challenges that come with driving, you need to do a full medical test every year, every 2 years. Recommended is to test the drivers not only on their vision but also on their basic muscles. I'm not good in all these medical terms, but their basic muscles, their behavior, their stamina, their stress, and to do a full medical check. Also testing their blood sugar, their blood pressure are because these are things that are known for drivers to be a risk. So that is something to think about. Let me see, how many standards are we talking about? Are we talking across the levels, and can you show them, please? So Jeremy, good question. We just finished, actually this morning, we just finished the new version of the standards. And what we will do in the email that you get after the webinar, we will put a link to the updated version of the fleet management standards, so that you can have a look at, okay, so how many do we have in total? I also saw a question, with so many gaps in the organization, how do you prioritize? I would say it's a great question. Thanks, Sheila. I would definitely recommend to use your data, your fleet management data, to prioritize. So, for example, if you see that you have a lot of issues with cost control, I would say, well, then focus on the ones that have to do with cost control. If you have a lot of if you have a lot of issues with road safety, then focus on those. Doing an assessment using standards should be supported with looking at your data and making sure that you have data, that at least you have baseline data. Another way to prioritize is, of course, the organizational priorities. So if your organization has pledged that it wants to reduce its emissions by 2025 or 2030, and you do see from the gaps from the assessment that you have a lot of gaps in the environmental practices, then that could also be a way to prioritize. That would be that would be my recommendation. Then let me see. Tackling the management interference with fleet managers, since most of fleeters are looked down upon when tackling the risk management part. What can one do tactically to assist the entire section? Okay, Peter, if I hope I do understand your question correctly. So, from a standards perspective, so I think with your question there's two issues, right? So what is the status of the fleet manager in the organization? So when you look at standards, how you can change that is by putting a standard in place that says we will only we will professionalize fleet management, and using standards you can do that by saying, oh well, we will have a gender balanced team. We will make sure that all of our fleet managers are professionally trained in fleet management. So these are sort of standards that you can use to raise the status of fleet managers. And then the risk management part in the standards, and I think we upgraded it from a advanced standard to a basic standard, is the standard to conduct a risk management or to make fleet part of a risk management exercise to be done annually. So there's different ways, and I hope I understood your question correctly, but there's different ways how you can tackle that. Let me see. How to deal with driver displaying highly aggressive behaviors. Well, Idris, I think with standards you can say, okay, well, we do test our drivers. There are ways in your recruitment processes where you can identify whether the driver is likely to be a more aggressive driver. There's a variety of psychological approaches or tests that look into that. And then the standard, of course, is that you can put standards in place where you say, okay, in our organization will not recruit these drivers, and we will have processes in place to reduce that or to not have that. I think, looking at your question, it is much more a direct management issue that you have. And I would suggest that you look into, okay, so A, what is causing these behaviors, and B, are there ways to reduce these behaviors through coaching, through feedback sessions with the drivers, through maybe with the support of your HR department, but that would be my advice. Let me see. Tanveer. Well, this is also more a practical session, but if you look at standards, then the standard for, I think, every organization should be now that every organization should ensure that you are disposing of all of your fleet waste in a sustainable and responsible manner. But we also do know that in some countries, and Yemen might be one of them, that in some countries that's not possible, right? Because you don't have the facilities to do responsible disposal of these. So if you don't have that, then I would say storing that is your best option. Because what you don't want is to just throw it out in the environment and then leave it like that, right? And if you dispose of it and you offer it to a waste provider, then you need to make sure that they are handling it in the most environmentally and socially responsible way. So I would say if you don't have any means to dispose of it, then leave it, store it as much as possible. And my advice would be, but this is not a standard, but more an advice, is work together with other organizations that are also in that same area. Maybe you can transport it to another country to make sure that you can sustainably dispose of it. Let me see, we have time for one more question. Let me see. There's a lot of question. Fleet task is to provide service to client unit. In order to know the efficiency and quality of the service, is there any assessment through platform or server questionnaire? Okay, yeah. So thanks, Kadir. So today we discussed the humanitarian fleet management standards, right? And from the humanitarian fleet management standards, you can also you can use them to look at, you can use them to look at the performance of your fleet and use the standards to turn them into questions and then ask your passengers, the users, to say, okay, well, do we meet those standards? So that's one way how you can do that. So I hope that answers the question. I see there are some French questions there as well. I'm looking at them. I will reach out to you. Thanks for those of you who entered the questions in the chat. I will reach out to you and give you provide you with some answers. So thanks for that. It is already 30 minutes gone, so I'm gonna finish. Thanks a lot for all your questions, for your active participation. I hope I hope it was useful. Like I said, in the email that we will send out today, you will find a link to the recorded version of this webinar. B, we will provide a link to the knowledge platform where you will find an updated document called Humanitarian Fleet Management Standards. I really encourage you to do the assessment. It's easy, you just have to tick the boxes, but it gives you some insight in how you score. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us after the webinar. We're all happy to hear from you. Next week, we do have another webinar done by our colleagues from the WHO, and they will talk to us about their approach, how they implemented their new transport booking app. So hope to see you all there. At the end of the webinar, you will get a question to rate the webinar. I hope you will fill it in because it really helps us to improve, to make changes and stuff like that. So thanks a lot and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.